All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the West Plains Chamber of Transportation Zoom call. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got a really great group of speakers that are going to share with us on a topic it's been on the top of our mind as an area and as a region for a couple of years now, but it's heightened with budget constraints at the federal level or at the state level, and just kind of some uncertainty around COVID and everything else. But there's still a lot of exciting wins that we get to present. So again, thank you for joining our call. Our call is proudly presented by DA Northwest. We'll hear from Mr. Bob McConkey in just a minute. But as I mentioned before, our area has been growing even in the midst of COVID. If you joined us on our May economic development Zoom call, we heard from a lot of our development partners that were mentioning that we haven't lost any speed. We're picking up right where we left off. And if you've driven down Highway 2 lately, you'll see that the whole area is tore up in a really good way. And so I invite you to make a trip down Highway 2, start heading west a little bit, and you'll see North 40 out there. Tim Bush has a car wash that's going on out there. And there's a few other projects that are breaking ground, as well as some projects that are kind of in the works in the future from Selkirk Pharma and others. And so transportation, as we grow, our infrastructure is the top of our mind. How are we going to be able to access some of the land that we need to develop? And then how do we ease congestion that's going to be coming up? So we thank our speakers that are going to be speaking in just a little bit, from Commissioner French to representatives from the PDA, SRTC, Washington Department of Transportation, and the airport. But before we start our call, we just want to do a little bit of Zoom etiquette. So just know that this call is being recorded. So we do ask that you be on your best behavior. If you do, you came into the meeting muted, but if you do accidentally unmute yourself, we'll kind of keep track of it on our end, but we ask that you do the same on your end as well. If you do have any questions, we'll be taking questions in the chat box, and then we'll be able to go ahead and ask our speakers those questions at the very end as we have time. If your question doesn't get asked, go ahead and just send our office an email, or you can leave a response in the chat box, and we'll make sure that we get it to the representatives that it needs to. Well, at this time, we want to thank our presenting sponsor, our chamber. We are blessed to have great investors that care about the West Plains and care about our vision. And so Mr. Bob McConkey is an elite investor in our chamber, and we just thank you for sponsoring our call. Sir, we would love to give you a chance to just share a few words.
Thank you, Toby. I'll be brief and probably not focus much on the main topic of transportation today. I will say that I want to give a shout out to Toby for the leadership, the progressive nature and the proactive nature of your leadership, and bringing us all together on a really a good cycle to keep us informed about what's going on in the West Plains. Obviously, it's been exploding. We see, the traffic. It's hard for me to complain about the traffic because, I'm a car selling guy, so we try to hold back in terms of our complaints, but we've seen the traffic, Hayford Road, Highway 2, that intersection. I mean, it's obviously a direct product of just the expansion of the West Plains. We started on the West Plains 28 years ago, and when we started out here, it was a pretty lonely place. There wasn't a lot going on, and so we've watched it progress over the years. Our business started out on the south end of the West Plains, out by I-90, and we started on 5 acres. We had 9 employees when we started. We thought the airport location was appropriate for us. Land values were very attractive at that point in time, and our 5-acre operation with 9 employees is now 130 acres in Spokane. We have a facility in Seattle. We have a facility in Las Vegas. So went from selling 15 cars a week to now 1,500 cars a week, and Spokane in the West Plains is our headquarters. It's where we, what we call home, and where we function. I want to just, everybody, this 2020 is a year that we'll always remember. We were, from a transportation perspective, auto sales in the second week of March were completely shuttered by way of government, by Jay Inslee. We basically shut down the ability to sell cars retail, which shut us down. And so we were closed from the middle of March until the middle of May. And we have since opened up, and we have not had a live auction since the middle of March. We have been running virtual auctions, and we are functioning at a very good level. Our partners in the West Plains have been hurt. We've always been a big, supplier of rooms to the various hotels around town, and our air travel has obviously been diminished, where everybody's basically buying cars on the internet. But we're selling roughly 1,500 cars a week through our locations, and we're doing it all completely online at this point in time. That's not a permanent situation for us. That's something that we hope to get back to as our state continues to open up. We'll open up and get back to a normal course of business as time moves on. But as we all know, in 60, 90 days, habits are changed in the human psyche, and this evolution towards a virtual marketplace is something that will stay with us, I think, to a certain extent. So we don't know what our future will look like, really, as we open up completely. The last thing I'll say, again, in I guess the spirit of support, is that as Airway Heights and the West Plains has grown, we have felt like, we started at 5 acres, and then we went to 15 acres, and then, we've continued to grow. And we have felt like the planning department and the permit process, while it has been appropriate, it has not been onerous. They've been a resource to us. It's been a positive thing. I still think that the West Plains maintains a very good business-friendly atmosphere, but also, again, within what's appropriate. In other words, it's not a laydown to get something done, but it's reasonable, and I want to say I appreciate that. I also want to say and give a shout out to the fire, EMT, and police support that we get. In normal course of business, we'll have 500-600 people on site every week, which brings with it all those challenges, along with 200, 300, 400 employees on site any given day. And the support we've received in the midst of any kind of a crisis or some sort of an event, even with the growth that we've seen within Airway Heights and within the West Plains, has been tremendous. So I just wanted to tell everybody that from somebody who's a bit of a veteran of the West Plains in the last 28 years, it has progressed with me, and we have been nothing but satisfied with the way we've been treated as a partner and as a business entity in the West Plains. And so, Toby, good job, and I'll turn it back over to you. We're honored to support this event on behalf of the Chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We really appreciate that. And I'm glad that you mentioned just the first responders, just in how they've been a resource to you, but even just in the events of the last couple of weeks. I know that we've kind of been, hearing news from District 10 and District 3 and all of our, like, Cheney and Airway Heights as well, and just the work that they're doing to try to just serve us well in this season. So we definitely want to thank them too. At this time, I want to invite our board chair, Eric Putoff, to say a few words.
Excellent. Thank you, Toby. And Bob, thank you for everything you just said there. It really has been a pleasure to watch you guys grow out here on the West Plains. And thank you personally and your organization, for the continued support for the Chamber and just the area, being an advocate for the area. It's people like you that help us be the right voices in the right rooms. So thanks again. I just want to let everybody know that we were really pleased with our golf outing this year, the West Plains Masters event. Thank you all who were able to participate. I know these are hard, and we didn't get as many people as we did last year. However, that being said, the new normal, we did still pretty well, and we were just pleased with the outcome. So thanks everybody for that support. Be on the lookout for our next big event, the Best of the West Awards. We'll be getting those out to you soon too, so we can participate in that. It will be virtual again this year as well. So we're really looking forward though to shifting hopefully back to in person when we can. and seeing all your faces. Until then, though, thanks for being here. Thanks for your support. And we look forward to connecting soon. So back to you, Toby.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that as well. And also just a reminder, nominations for Best of the West are open right now. So we've got about 84 people on this call. So if you have seen somebody in the West Plains serving our area well, we would love to be able to celebrate them here in November with our Best of the West. Again, the gala is going to look a little different. It'll probably be virtual, but we'll at least do some celebrating. So please nominate somebody. We would love to honor those that just really deserve it in our area. Well, right now, without further ado, we do want to hand the floor over to our speakers. And so just to set the stage a little bit, I mentioned just the need for transportation infrastructure. These are the leaders in our region that help get roads built, that help with the planning. So their job today is to give us a good state of where is our transportation infrastructure in the West Plains today, where do we want to go, and then also what are some of the steps that we need to do to get there. We are also going to celebrate a couple wins. There's some projects that are in the works right now that are going to be exciting and be transformative, as well as we just, anytime you're driving down I-90, you can see that our interchanges are being worked on Geiger Boulevard is being worked on. A lot of that is due to the credit of our county commissioners, and we have one that's just a huge advocate for the West Plains. And so I want to hand the floor over first to Commissioner Al French to just give us a good state of what does our roads look like in the West Plains today, and again, what are some of the things that we could be excited for. And I do want to put a little bug in your ear. I know there are any updates I have to ask on what you think Hayford Road in the future could look like. We would love to hear. But Commissioner French, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Toby, and also thank you to the West Plains Chamber and its sponsors for putting together this event. It's a great opportunity to be able to talk about the West Plains and all the exciting things that are happening. And so I'm going to start out by really talking a little bit about big picture foundational elements. And so, you know, the one thing about growth is that it presents new challenges, and success is measured in part by how we deal with those challenges. And so I want to start my comments by stepping back and looking at economic development and growth in the region. One of the attributes that I admire about our tribal partners is that they look and plan for the future, not by year, but by generation. That leads them to looking at issues that their impact today, but also their impact on their grandchildren. And so I really admire that about them, and want to try and take that same approach as we look about growth in Spokane County. We also want to ensure that the growth does not degrade the quality of life that all of us have come to enjoy, we expect, and we demand. So there are lots of people that are leaving urban areas like Seattle and Portland that come to communities like Spokane because we have the quality of life that they lost. And so as I look at growth for the county, I want to see the impacts of both today and long-term vision of the community, 20, 30, 50 years. What does that have to look like, or what does that look like from a 50,000 foot level? And so as you look at the region, we basically have 4 commercial industrial districts. We have the downtown financial core of the city of Spokane. We have the industrial tech industries in the valley and Liberty Lake. And we have distribution facilities in the north end of the county. And finally, we have the burgeoning manufacturing and aerospace logistical services locating on the West Plains. So as we look at the West Plains, we have to ask ourselves, what are the elements that we need to support growth? First, we need land, and boy, we've got abundance of that in the West Plains. Then we need land use policies to allow for growth that happens. And for the most part, we do have that in place in the West Plains. The 2013 Comprehensive Land Use Plan identified significant amounts of land for industrial and commercial development. What we lack is land to accommodate housing. And that unfortunately was taken out of the West Plains Comprehensive Land Use Plan as a result of the litigation. So we are suffering from shortage of housing. So we've added thousands of jobs to the West Plains, but the workers have to commute to those jobs from other parts of the county, which creates pressure on I-90. This pressure is exacerbated by the climb up the hill to the West Plains and the raised structure through the downtown core. So how do we plan and accommodate growth in the West Plains without putting pressure on our existing infrastructure like I-90, which all of us rely on. So what are the elements that we need to accommodate growth? We clearly need water, sewer, and stormwater to be able to accommodate this growth. And so we do have a partnership through S3R3 and working with the city and the county and SIA to address a lot of these issues. One of those particularly is stormwater. We want to be able to use our land for productive purposes, not for the storage and retention of water. So the S3R3 and the PDA are working to find solutions to those challenges. The other critical element to growth in the West Plains is transportation, as Toby indicated. How do we plan to expand transportation infrastructure to accommodate the growth to the area? One of the things we are doing is SIA, S3R3, WSDOT, Airway Heights, and the county are working together to identify where is this growth anticipated to occur in the next 2, 5, 10, 20-year periods, and how can we build the infrastructure to keep pace with the growth? The state and the county have made significant investments in the Middle Lake I-90 interchange and the redevelopment of Geiger Road, Electric Avenue, Hayford interchanges, and Geiger Boulevard as it goes to the interchange to SIA. This is a good start and has obviously generated substantial investment in the area, but we need to do more. With growth comes pressure to our network, but it's not just the pressure to accommodate growth for job creation, but also for workforce housing and the services to support that. So S3R3 is partnering with the state and Airway Heights on the West Plains Connection projects in Airway Heights that would develop 6th and 12th Avenue as a parallel route to SR12. This project, Todd Coleman's going to talk about a little bit later. So with this growth comes the opportunity to fix or readdress decisions made in the past. The growth to traffic to SIA has created a need to do a grade separation at the access road to the terminal in Spotted Road. With the increase in traffic to SIA, this intersection needs to have a safer configuration because the airport will continue to grow. And with that growth comes the parallel runway and its impact on Hayford Road. So what are the things we need to do to be able to accommodate the reconfiguration of Hayford Road so it continues to provide another source of access to Airway Heights, but also accommodates the expansion of SIA. So as we look at transportation funding, our world is different today than it was this time last year. The voters approved I-76, which will change the way we fund transportation needs. COVID-19 pandemic has decimated transportation budgets through the reduction in gas taxes due to fewer people traveling. This is not just a concern for Spokane, but statewide. I currently sit on the state County Road Administration Board that administers funds for counties across the state, and we've seen a significant reduction in revenues this year. I also sit on the Washington State Association of Counties Subcommittee for road funding, and we are working to identify new sources of funding to support our road systems, both locally and statewide. This next year's legislative session will be a challenging one, but we have to find solutions if we are going to continue to maintain our infrastructure and to grow to accommodate growth. You know, Spokane is unique because it is one of the few, if not only, locations in the state where we have road, I-90, we have rail through the Geiger Spur, and we have runway through SIA, all located in the same place and available land to be able to develop around it. You know, as difficult as this year has been, we just recorded $1.1 billion of new construction in 2020. So development is happening, growth is happening, despite the virus. So I look forward to the dialogue, and I look forward to your questions and listening to the other presenters. Thank you very much.
Commissioner French, we appreciate that a lot. Yeah, it is interesting how everything goes together. And even though we're not going to address a lot of the funding issues, I mean, there I-976 and the gas taxes, there's a lot of problems that we need to find solutions for. But somebody wise once told me that anytime you fix a problem, you end up creating more problems. And so I think we're growing, and we created some more problems, which were good. That I think when we all come to the table, we can accomplish great things. And I think that's a good lead into our next speaker. So Todd Coleman is the Executive Director of S3R3 Solutions. They're the public development authority out here in the West Plains, but he's got an interesting project that he ended up getting a lot of the speakers that you're going to hear today all at the same table to come together on a project right in the midst of COVID that's going to be very impactful. So Mr. Coleman, I would love to hand the floor over to you.
Thanks, Toby, and thanks, Commissioner French, for laying the perfect groundwork for talking about this project and for your leadership. As you mentioned, not only from the economic development standpoint, but also from the quality of living, which we hear about at our West Plains Chamber meetings from the people who are already here, and who we hear from people who are interested in coming here, is absolutely paramount. So we've got to get the right plans in place, and then we got to deliver those plans. And so here's one of those steps, kind of bringing it down to the ground level. And one of the things that we were hearing constantly as we were looking at the Highway 2 corridor with WSDOT, which I think Shar is going to talk about here a little bit later, is that Highway 2 is getting more and more congested every single day with every project that gets developed. And the last thing we want to do is bring a customer in from outside the area, say, hey, we have got the spot for you, and let's get going on it, sign the deals, and then have somebody say, we don't have the infrastructure to support that. And so we've got to get ahead of these issues to make sure that we've truly got shovel-ready ground that are ready to go. And that's what this project is all about. We were hearing congestion issues relating to projects that we were looking at. And again, we were starting to hear complaints from some of you in this chat room or Zoom meeting about just your concerns about getting onto and around the Highway 2 corridor. So this is a project that's actually been conceived for a number of years. It shows up in a number of different plans in part, but was never formally adopted as a corridor to create congestion relief. But we were able to bring all the partners together, and I want to thank right now the cities, City of Airway Heights and the City of Spokane, who are major contributors to this project, but also to the private developers along this corridor, including the tribes, and our other public partners, STA, SRTC, and the county, and a number of other folks, Fairchild Air Force Base, who all came together to really support this. And so it's been great. As Toby mentioned, we started this project at a terrific time. We ended up doing the entire solicitation for the consultants by Zoom meetings. I had never been in a Zoom meeting per se. And so we got to actually conduct interviews, select consultants, and scope the entire project and design the project throughout this time. In addition to that, we also, this was my first time to really have a project that couldn't have any public meetings. We had to do all of it virtually, and a shout out to TO Engineers, who's the main consultant on it, but also Big Sky, who did the communications and developed a website. And you know, we had over 1,700 unique hits to our website on this, and had over 150 what I think were quality comments. So I think the public outreach, in my view anyway, was maybe even more successful than what we get through our typical in-person meetings. So that was interesting to see. So again, the idea here is to provide congestion relief on Highway 2, increase capacity, and to reduce response times. Right now, there are segments of this corridor that aren't complete, and so as emergency responders try to get to different locations, neighborhoods, or businesses, lots of times they got to route around these gaps, and so this would complete this entire corridor. It basically parallels Highway 2. It starts from Craig Road over there near the Spokane tribe, runs along 6, and then if you're familiar with the fire station there off of Garfield, it transitions from 6th Avenue down to 10th, goes through the Kalispell property, across Hayford Road, and then terminates right now at Campus Drive. Ultimately, this roadway will go all the way to the Sunset Corridor, because as was mentioned, we've got to be able to provide that entire route. But at this point, it just goes to the campus drive, which is where the new storage units are being installed at this time. The current gaps in this, and which is the first phase that we've proposed, is the segment between Garfield Road and Hayford Road. And we currently got this in for a Transportation Improvement Board grant. We're looking for about $3 million. And then we've also received commitments from the City of Airway Heights and the Kalispell tribe in order to provide match dollars for this project. As we were conceiving this, we also anticipated that with everything going on in the U.S. right now, that there would likely be a federal stimulus package that would come out at some point. And so we wanted to make sure that we had this project ready to go. So we'll finish up in October an entire package that goes from Craig Road to Campus Drive, which is about a $20 million project that will be prepared. So if a stimulus package does come up after November or the first of the year, that we're prepared for that. And I also will mention that, and you're going to hear from Sabrina at SRTC here a little bit later. She's been reaching out, trying to find projects that are ready to go. And so we've been able to submit that same project to her as a project for looking at state funding as well. So our goal is if we can get the TIB funding in place, as I mentioned, we submitted that in August. We will get notified in November. That would allow us to go into final construction in final design in 2021 and construction in 2022. The other gap is between Deer Heights Road and Flint Road. So that's just north of where the North 40 is being constructed currently. So that would be either our second phase or would be the next phase that we would have a high priority on in order to get this, this entire corridor, all the gaps filled within it. So again, I think this has just been a great opportunity to pull all of those team players together. We got a lot of letters of support. Appreciate all those folks. And we call this the West Plain Connections Project. And the reason why we gave it that name is because we see this as the first of many. And the most likely next project will be a parallel core to this, which is 21st Avenue, which is just south of Highway 2. And then that transportation network system that Commissioner French was talking about. So we anticipate that there's going to be a number of projects. I ask you to stay tuned because I think we're going to start having some really significant conversations about the priorities around all of those projects coming up starting this fall over the next 12 months or so. And it'll be a great opportunity for you all to get involved if you're interested in it. So with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Toby, and look forward if there's any questions later on.
I appreciate that, and I think I just want to point out on your project where you mentioned that the road connection starts at the Spokane tribe and then goes through the Kalispell tribe trust land, through Airway Heights, through county, city. I just want to applaud your efforts of how do you connect so many different individual distinct entities to come to sit at a table and agree on just a good plan for this project. And I know we're going to hear from Shar from WSDOT in a minute, but I think I heard Mr. Gribner say it's like in a day and age where funding is tight, it was very creative how we were able to get an alternative route congestion off of Highway 2 without having to build a giant I-90 right over the top of it. Like, this is a doable project that's going to have significant impact. So thank you for your work on that. And then also just you introduced Ms. Sabrina Minshall from the Spokane Regional Transportation Council very well, just in terms of how do we have a good list of projects. I had to learn that a project doesn't happen unless it's on SRTC's list. And so I'm excited to kind of hear from Sabrina. What's the state of our transportation system and what do you see coming down the pike?
Thanks, Toby. I'm waiting for you to queue up our presentation here. All right, there we go. So I'm going to show some visuals here, and nobody get too excited because you're not going to be able to see them real quick, but I will be happy to share these. First, I'm just real quick going to put through, many of you don't know who Spokane Regional Transportation Council is, or SRTC. So we're a metropolitan planning organization, a regional transportation planning organization. We have some federal and state designations. But really, for most of you, what that means is it's a collaborative group made up of all your local governments and your transportation organizations. We have on this call even our chairman, Mayor Ben Wick. I'm not sure if our vice chairman, who is Councilman Schmidt out of Cheney, and as well as our past chair, Commissioner French. And I also noticed that we even have other board members on. So thanks to everybody. Really, this is a place where what Toby talked about, which is all those collaborations happen, plus the private sector. So that discussion that Todd brought up about kind of what projects are ready and how do we move forward with that legislative process has been fantastic over the last year that I've been engaged with it, with your chambers. And so a big shout out to Toby and Melanie and others who have been able to pull together and really say, where are the priorities? But that's just the start. So there's lots of work still to be done. Next slide, please, Toby. So this is just what I pointed out here. Here's our membership. You can see it goes across the entire county. So the work that Todd's been doing with others about that West Plain Connection project happens on a daily basis in terms of how do we coordinate work, because we do have to provide lots of fiscal stewardship. You know, these are your tax dollars. These are our tax dollars. And how do we maintain restraint and fiscal stewardship at the same time that we're trying to figure out, you know, how do we do that in a way with the limited budget? Is everybody else seeing my slides? I just saw that someone doesn't have it. Okay, most people do. Okay, next slide, please. So I just wanted to be able to show quickly that we do have core programs. We can pass this on. Really today, we're just going to talk about that we do planning and technical services, coordination. There's lots of things that our agency does that I'm going to touch on a few of these. Next slide, please, Toby. So what you guys really care about for this call is where have we been, where are we going, and what does that look like for growth? I'm going to talk about this a little bit in the West Plains, but really my job is to talk about on a regional basis and how does West Plains fit into that. So back in 2015, we did some data projections. Every 4 years, we do a long range plan. So this is where Toby was talking about. If it doesn't fit into SRTC's overall long range plan and it doesn't create these lists, it doesn't go somewhere. And really the point of that is for coordination. We really don't want agencies, none of us would want agencies, and especially in fiscal stewardship times, to be able to have these kind of disparate things going on and they're not connected. So there is a plan, and we do continue to update those plans because things happen. Growth happens in places, development happens in places, and we want to keep being updated that. So if you look back in 2015, we were looking at just under 500,000 people, and we had families with households with children were at 27.2%. But if you go ahead to the next slide, even in 2015, we were projecting that by the time we hit 2040, we were going to have an increase of 21%, with an increase in vehicle trips of 23%. So that was a 2040 forecast. We've gotten much better, and with our investment from our board's support, to have better data. Next slide, please, Toby. So what you can see here is we can see on the left side, our population employment totals have continued to rise. So our red line here is the employment, the blue line is our population. So we've had steadily increases, and of course you can see that there between 11 and 15 was the dip in our recession where our employment started to dip, and then it's continuing to go up. But what's interesting is that on the right, our population employment growth rates, as you can see, they bounce all over the place. So what we have to make sure, and we're thinking about how do we project forward, and this really harkens back to what Commissioner French was saying, is we don't want to react too quickly to rates and trends that bounce from year to year. We want to look at a larger trend pattern and be able to be thinking about it in a really strategic way. Next slide, please, Toby. So some of these slides look a little bit familiar, and these have been updated through 2019 data. So what you're seeing here is our regional growth from 2010 to 2019 in our high growth areas. So this here is based on building permits. We look at this a few different ways. So it's not just about people, but where is those building permit totals? So you can see in the West Plains that we've seen a lot of building permit activity. You can also see through the rest of the region, other places that have seen a lot of building permit activity. Take a look down in Cheney. That's even more what we're seeing there. So lots of places where we're starting to see it. Next slide, please, Toby. This is another slide that we started to share with our board. The gray bar is where we saw population in 2010. The red bar is compared to where we were in 2010. What has been the average growth rate, which means population added since 2010. So you can see just since 2010, how much population's been added based upon where the base was in 2010. And on those main areas that we showed you in that last slide, West Plains actually ranks third in the areas of where we're actually seeing that growth, with the top being on the far eastern side of the county with Liberty Lake Green Acres, Central Spokane Valley, which is that industrial area, and then West Plains. So again, this is through 2019. So that just shows you by a percentage based upon where it was in 2010, what we're seeing in growth. Next slide, please, Toby. So this one's really interesting. I'm going to spend a little bit of time here on it. This is a slide that we showed back with our joint chambers. This talks about the dynamic that also Commissioner French brought up, which is for every 10 workers, so this is a commute pattern, for every 10 workers, how many of those workers live somewhere else? So if you see in the West Plains, it's actually the lowest amount of people who live and work in the same area with 2.6. If you compare that, for example, up in North Spokane, it's up to 3.4. So that really just tells you for our region, in all of these areas, we have a very high percentage of people who live and work in different parts of our valley. So while I concur, we need to definitely keep making roadway improvements and transit improvements and ped bike improvements in the West Plains, what we have to continue to do is really look at our entire network as a system and think about how people are getting across our valley to the different areas and within the county, because all of those things are really going to matter to continue to grow your businesses. Next slide, please, Toby. So one way to look at this, and we're going to try our animation, is of the 5 speakers on your panel today, 4 of those speakers, if we were holding this in person and we were right now sitting in the West Plains, how would we have gotten to where we would be working today? So the first one is Spokane Valley. That is where I am currently living. If I was living in Spokane Valley and going to the West Plains, this would be the path I would be taking. So if you see that right now, you can see I am taking primarily I-90 to get there, Highway 2, and then over within the local network. The next, for example, next animation, please, Toby. Shar, I believe you can see yourself in this story. One of our other panelists, if living on the South Hill, would also be taking their local network off the South Hill, getting onto I-90, going onto Highway 2 without many other options, and then going into the West Plains. Our next panelist, next slide, coming from Deer Park, Mr. Coleman. Coming from Deer Park, where he is coming to us live, if we were in a different alternate reality right now, and we were being able to do this in person, we'd be coming from Deer Park down a state highway, down through some local roadway systems to be able to get on I-90 and to Highway 2. Next slide, please. One of our other panelists would be coming from an Eagle Ridge, coming up 195, which is currently under study, coming through a very crazy connection onto I-90, coming up Highway 2, and then coming into the West Plains. We do have one of our panelists that actually lives in the West Plains, so I didn't map her direction. But so 4 out of 5 actually are using primarily our regional network coming onto the West Plains, and then using those alternative networks for a small portion of their trip. The reason I wanted to point this out was to realizing that as we're looking at these next slides, which are employment density here, next slide, Toby, our population growth, which has been since 2019, through 2019, and the next slide, Toby. And then when you see these together, thinking back to only 2.9 out of 10 are actually living and working within the same area, we have to look at it very strategically about where do we invest our limited resources to make sure that all of the folks are actually being able to get to, from, and within the West Plains in ways that support our businesses and our economic growth. And that has to take a very strategic direction, and all of us working together like it's been happening. So next slide. And this is where I'll just end it, is just reminding us, and we're starting to see this more and more, that we can't solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created it. And I end all my slides with this because I really honor and appreciate the Chamber's work to make sure that we're having these discussions. So with that, I just appreciate the Chamber and everybody who's been thinking about it, and look forward to the rest of the discussion.
Ms. Sabrina, thank you so much for that. It is interesting, if you remember back on that slide, I think the amount of people that live in the West Plains and work here, it's really interesting. I think that was a big revelation to me, as we're trying to think of the transportation system, not just say, hey, our goal is to get people to I-90 and then we just kind of go like this and then let it be the rest of the region's problem. But we really are a system, and there's a lot of the jobs that are opening up here. they're coming from residents in other parts of the community. So what's good for the West Plains is good for the rest of the region, and what's good for the rest of the region is definitely good for the West Plains. But right now, I do want to invite our next speaker. So Ms. Shar Kay, she's the Regions Planning and Strategic Community Partnership Director at Washington State Department of Transportation. And so we thank her and her team for her work on just some of the study of Highway 2, and she's got some other great things that she wants to share as well. So Ms. Shar, the floor is yours.
I want to thank you, West Plains Chamber, for having us today. I too can attest to the increasing growth in and around the West Plains. During my 33 years served with WSDOT, I originally lived in Medical Lake and on Fairchild Air Force Base. And so I have too witnessed the increasing growth in and around the West Plains area. Today, we're going to just briefly talk about one of our current studies. Next slide, please, Toby. And it's the West Plains sub-area study in and around the US 2 corridor. And it's the first phase of a two-part study. The second phase will focus in and around the I-90 area, Medical Lake and Geiger interchanges. This study extends to Fairchild Air Force Base, westerly and into the east. It extends to I-90 connection. We know that the US 2 corridor serves multiple purposes. It's a national defense corridor with an initial purpose of serving travel for Fairchild Air Force Base. And it also provides local access for the cities of Airy Heights, Spokane County, and the city of Spokane. And now the tribal lands, Kalispel tribe and the Spokane tribe. It also provides airport access. So it serves multiple purposes. We are aware, have been aware that growth in and around the corridor has been increasingly growing. And so over the years, we've partnered with many of our partners. Next slide, Toby, please. And identifying some strategies to address the US 2, particularly the US 2 corridor, and then also I-90 and Geiger. One of the things that we found out earlier with our partners is a high interest not to really expand the US 2 corridor's footprint. Initially, we thought, oh, wow, we could add additional lanes. But as the cities started to develop in and around the US 2 corridor, there was a concerted interest to maintain the footprint as is, to provide for pedestrian access to and from, and also reduce pedestrian safety issues and other concerns. And so part of the study objectives here are to look at safety, mobility, quality of life, and economic vitality in concert with our partners, many of whom were presented in the previous slide. And I think it's very important to note that when we initially, years ago, started to really have a lot of focus in and around this area, we weren't fortunate enough to have S3R3, the Public Development Authority, present. And now we do have them, and we're very appreciative of the efforts that they have led and coordinated to really actualize some of the planning efforts that we have worked on over the years. Next slide, please, Toby. So initially, as with most studies, you identify the needs, and we've identified needs in and around. And one of the focuses that I'd like to mention here is that we also have identified an opportunity to really provide better connectivity and enhancement between multimodal opportunities and the single occupancy vehicle use of our public network, transportation network. And we're fortunate with the development of the West Plains intermodal facility out that STA recently developed. And so there's definitely increased opportunity that we will be exploring in this study to enhance that. Also mentioned earlier by multiple of our particularly SRTC, was that we have realized that 90% of folks who have lived, who are working in and around the West Plains area actually live outside of the West Plains. Next slide, Toby, please. Went back. And so with that, that's truly an indicator for us that there is opportunity for increased residential development to reduce some of those commute trips that Sabrina talked about earlier. Next slide. As part of this study, this has been a first for us, but it's not new to our region. SRTC and other studies, the county study up north, employed this same analysis. We consulted with a sub-consultant to look at what is the market land use development forecast for this area. This forecast is based on an economic model to predict what we could reasonably expect to develop as far as land use by the year 2040. And so in the West Plains area, if you could go back, sorry, to the next slide. In the West Plains area, including Medical Lake and Cheney, residential developments are expected to increase by roughly 16,500 units. Retail demand, 2.3 million square feet. Office, 240,000 square feet. And industrial, 3.9 million square feet. That's in the entire West Plains, including Medical Lake and Cheney. In and around the phase 1 area, next slide, we're expected to realize, of course, a lot less, but nonetheless, housing units, I think it's particularly to note, roughly 4,300 housing units in the area, primarily driven by the expected industrial growth and office and retail growth in and around the area. Next slide. And I think it's important to mention that all of this information is available at westplainsconnect.com, and we can provide the Leland study for you to really look at. What are our next steps? We're currently modeling the projected land use for 2040 with hopes of having, expectation of having strategies, practical solutions provided as opportunities for future improvement to SRTC to inform the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. We also have a plan to, in partnership with S3R3, to look at the I-90 corridor, the Medical Lake and Geiger interchanges. And in this phase, or during this phase, we also plan to extend our partnerships with the city, to the city of Cheney and to the city of Medical Lake. Next slide. And so I can't emphasize enough that we are really excited about the synergy that's happening in and around this area, and with our many partners that have really been the boots in the grounds of pursuing many of the improvements that we're seeing in and around the West Plains. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shar, for that. Before I let you go, I do want to ask, so the 16,500 units that are expanding, that's new residential units expected by 2040?
Yes.
That's a huge amount just for the people that are on this call. I mean, I think the West Plains right now, our data says that we have around 60,000 people that live in the West Plains. So 16,500 units would be a huge amount of increase in residential in the area. A lot of that happening kind of right there in that West or the kind of Fairways Golf Course area, and a lot of density up in Airway Heights as well, and Cheney. So thank you for that. Well, right now we saved, I'm going to say this to Miss Lisa, we saved the best for last. So there's been a lot of growth, especially around the airport area. And so we wanted to invite Miss Lisa Corcoran, project engineer from SIA, to talk about the expansion project that they have, and then also kind of this spotted road interchange. So growth around the airport is key to the area, and so we're kind of excited to just hear how the transportation infrastructure is going to help meet that anticipated growth in the future. So Miss Lisa, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Toby. All right, yeah, as Toby mentioned, there's some dynamic change happening around the West Plains, including the airport. As part of the transportation network, aviation is always adapting to change, including growth and development. Planning for infrastructure improvements, whether it's located on airside or landside, or be driven by regulatory or design standards, is something we continue to incorporate in all of our development. I'll be focusing on a project that is currently under construction, and then highlighting a couple of other projects that are in the works and are under design. All right, so this one, the slide that's up on the screen right now is Airport Drive inbound realignment. It is a multi-phase project and consists of constructing a new alignment from the cell phone waiting lot to the terminal. The existing alignment, as shown on the slide, includes several decision points very near the terminal for accessing outside surface parking lots, garage parking structures, hotels, and other facilities at the airport, which have created driver confusion, congestion near the terminal, and really non-optimal conditions during peak hours. The new alignment, also shown on the screen there, will improve the passenger experience, improve traffic flow, and create exit points for all parking facilities well before reaching the terminal, which is our goal. The new alignment will also allow for future parking facility consolidation, which has been a big item that we've been looking at, and then future development near the airport, which is always a good thing to incorporate. Next slide. Phase one of the project, which is highlighted on the screen there, is currently under construction. And we have a couple of construction photos to show you. Next slide. So these are the photos of construction. Two of these items there. So some of the photos incorporate two of the three main Avista power sources that feed the terminal. We've relocated and placed those underground. Fiber and communication lines were also extended. The airport drainage perimeter ditch was also converted into a below-grade pipe storm drain system. The pipes that you see on the screen there, just to give you a perspective of size, those are two 60-inch diameter pipes. So quite a bit of flow goes through that system. Next slide. We have more construction photos capturing temporary access entrance to the cell phone waiting lot, head walls of the drainage system, water main installations, and really the main earthwork, which is occurring right now to build the new roadway. It's been a great project with a great contractor and a consulting team, and we'll be completing this phase of work here in spring of 2021. Now this slide here that Toby's showing, that incorporates all the phases. So the next phase that we'll be working on is 2A and 2B. 2A is the northern connection located near the cell phone waiting lot, and 2B is the southern connection. 2B is under design, and we're anticipating going out for construction bids early next year, and anticipate completing that project in the fall, late fall of 2021. Next slide. All right, this next project is one that you may have recently read about in the news, along with the previous project, Airport Drive inbound realignment. This is the Spotted Road realignment and interchange project. It's currently going through the environmental and preliminary design phase. Next slide. This is just another view from the Geiger Boulevard and I-90 perspective, looking towards the airport and seeing the orange alignment, which is the new relocated segment of Spotted Road. Next slide. This is a really good plan view shot, and it shows the realignment and the interchange all together, and really why we're doing this. The purpose of the project is to relocate the segment of Spotted Road further away from the runway end and outside the runway protection zone as required by FAA. It's also showing, oh, you want to go back? There you go. It's also showing the interchange that will help separate the multimodal activity that we have here at the airport. So typically we're wanting to separate passenger traffic going straight to the terminal from the cargo, commercial traffic, and other traffic looking to access south of the airport or south, to the highway network system. Next slide. Now, this next project is a really exciting one. As Commissioner French can tell you, decades of planning went into this. Phase one of the rail truck transload facility was constructed last year and consisted of connecting to the Geiger Spur Rail owned by the county and crossed Craig Road and terminated onto airport property. The airport was pretty fortunate to be a recipient of the 2019 grant, build grant for phase 2 of the project. And that's the highlighted section there, the darker gray rectangular shape in this on the screen. Next slide. Okay, phase 2 on this image is outlined in the orange border of the screen. And so it doesn't include the vertical infrastructure as seen on the, with the warehouses there. This slide is a rendering of what the build out could incorporate. Phase 2 really focuses on constructing as much infrastructure needed to be pad ready. Next slide. This is phase 2. The work includes installation of water, sanitary sewer, storm drain, power, lighting, communication lines, along with a paved access driveway. It also includes the installation of loading tracks, running tracks, a large concrete pad for transloading circulation and container storage areas. Next slide. This slide is a cross-section of the facility, and it shows the future expansion of the tracks and the transloading areas as we continue to plan for growth and development of the site. So I think with that said, I've rapidly gone through every slide, and hope I've updated you on some of the projects that the airport is working on. And with that said, I'll pass it over to you, Toby.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lisa. It's interesting that Spotted Road interchange where we talk about how do you ease congestion off of Highway 2. If you noticed, that Spotted connects right to the Geiger Boulevard interchange, which is going to be updated here in the next year. And then that future 21st paving just south of Highway 2 into Airway Heights. It's going to be an interesting connection point to a lot of that land in there too, a direct access to the freeway. And so maybe that could alleviate some of that congestion that we do see right now on Hayford Road too. So interesting project for the future on that. Well, right now I want to say thank you so much to our attendees. Thank you so much to our speakers today. We really appreciate the partnership between, again, Commissioner Al French, Todd Coleman from S3R3, Sabrina Minshall from SRTC, Charlene Kay from Washington Department of Transportation, and especially Lisa Corcoran from SIA. Thank you so much for sharing today and giving us a little bit of a celebration of there's some projects that are in the ground and coming that are going to be transformative to our area. Well, I got a couple things before you log off. Mark your calendars, October 21st. We're going to have the new Fairchild Air Force Base commander, Colonel Bentley, is going to be speaking to our group. I had a chance to meet with him last month. He's got great leadership and a great vision of Fairchild. Right now, it is the, I want to say they're fully expanded out with flights and airplanes. And so a huge, just economic driver in our area, and so he has an important role out there. Also, I mentioned it earlier, our Best of the West nominations are open, so please take a minute and email Deanna at westplainschamber.org. We would love to get your nominations for either small business of the year, mid-sized business of the year, large business of the year, young entrepreneur of the year, and then kind of business leader of the year, and as well as our legacy. So please nominate somebody. It's been an interesting year, and we want to finish it with just a good celebration. So we need your help. Again, thank you so much for joining with us today. Thank you for the partnership and just joining us on this vision that we've got great things in store for the West Plains, and we are going to be a shining spot, not just for us, but for the entire region. So again, thank you for joining with us. We'll see you next time.